Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Williams. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Williams. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics on Random. Egberto Williams, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today, folks. We are going to have a great show for you today. Why? Because today is the day that I'm going to play a pretty darn good interview that we did at the Bridge Alliance in Washington, D.C. with a Republican. And I wish Republicans and Democrats could have this sort of a discussion. It's not a matter of changing one's values. It's a matter of dealing with one values, but we'll get to that in a little bit. What is the program gonna be about today? The title of the program today. First, I tell you what, let me go ahead and get a few things started here. Make sure that we are run all over the place, meaning that we are triggered all over. Anyhow, title of the program today. This Republican impressed me, and he is worth listening to. That's the title of the show today. This Republican impressed me, and he is worth listening to. Subtitle, I met Republican Bill Shireman, President and CEO of Future 500 at the Bridge Alliance Conference in Washington, D.C. The conversation we had was pretty prescient. I was very impressed with this Republican. It's not that I agreed with Bill Shireman. It was that we could have a conversation that could lead somewhere. He listened and I listened. No one had to deny their values. I mean, that is the important thing, right? A lot of people think that listening or trying to work together means that somebody has to destroy their values or something of that nature. That couldn't be further from the truth, because, folks, the truth of the matter is we are in one community, one town, one country, and we have to exist. But before I get started with the program, I want to discuss a few things. First of all, I want to give a shout out. I am usually very tough on MSNBC's and NBC's Meet the Press anchor, Chuck Todd, because I think a lot of times he's pretty much a conformist. He's pretty much, in my opinion, that is, he pretty much toes the line. He pretty much gives too many Republicans a break when they're coming on the show. He gives too many corporatists breaks when they come on the show. And I think that hurts us all. But I tell you, one of the things that I was very impressed with, he did a piece yesterday. On McCarthyism that I found extraordinarily important, that I hope people understood, because it was more than that, it was very well done. And let's talk about it real quickly on the other side, but here it is.
Tonight I'm obsessed with a term I've been hearing a lot, one that's been bandied about without much intellectual honesty or care.
Gruesome display of modern-day McCarthyism. The shoes of Joe McCarthy.
Full Joe McCarthy.
McCarthyism in reverse.
Modern-day Joe McCarthy.
McCarthyism is an enduring legacy of Republican Senator Joe McCarthy of Wisconsin. He led a systematic campaign in the early 50s accusing people of being communist sympathizers, dragging them in front of cameras for unethical hearings that were merely political spectacles, accusing them of treason without a shred of real evidence, holding up lists without anything on them. McCarthy's purported goal was to root out communism in American society. What it accomplished instead was creating a national climate of fear. Joe McCarthy may be dead, but his tactics are surely not, like the attempts to silence the opposition by calling them unpatriotic.
The rats who are undermining the foundation of our nation would take a shovel and dig out and destroy those rats.
Adam Schiff, he's a lowlife. Frankly, they should look at him for treason.
Parade of accusations levied entirely in the absence of fact.
Even if there are only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
The Prime Minister of Ukraine, the Interior Minister, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, the head of the Ukrainian Anti-Corruption League, all meddled in the election on social media and otherwise.
The efforts to discredit journalists by berating them publicly.
Tomorrow is a symbol, the leader, and the cleverest of the jackal pack, which is always found at the throat of anyone who dares to expose individual communists and traitors.
The media, the dishonesty, the total deceit and deception makes them certainly partially the opposition party.
Some believe McCarthyism was about the Soviet Union and communists, external threats. But it wasn't. It was about the damage this nation can inflict upon itself. When we lose sight of our past and our principles, when we succumb to our basest instincts, when we favor fear over fact. McCarthyism wasn't about communism, it was about power. It wasn't about exposing threats, it was about imposing fear. It wasn't about them, it was about us. And now here we are again, confronting the very same machinations designed to confuse, obscure, and antagonize. It's wrong, and we all need to say so. After all, have we no sense of decency?
Wow, I think that was such a well put together piece by Chuck Todd. I'm looking at our signal in here, connection to Facebook, and I noticed that it's sort of iffy. I'm not exactly sure what's the reason for that, but it seems like it's going through, just not going through fully. For those of you who are having problems seeing us at any given time, note that we will, when the replay of this goes out, if you're having technical problems, the podcast won't have the technical problems because we do that at the same time that we're sending it over the internet. We're also taping it, so that should not be a problem. I'm not exactly sure why we are having the technical issues right now, but rest assured that even if you don't get it right now, if some of it is a little blurry or otherwise, that it will be fine and that we will have copies for wherever it's not going completely well. We will be able to give you some. Give you the podcast of this thing. Seems like it's still going out with a whole lot of problems. This may be a situation where our network, not our network, but the Facebook network is problematic, but I think it looks like it may, if in the long run, solve itself. So again, we will rebroadcast if necessary when this happens. Anyhow, the other thing that I want to show you guys is something that is quite important, right? And it goes as follows. If you take a look at Lawrence O'Donnell last night did a piece on Pete Buttigieg. And I really want you to see this particular piece on Buttigieg, because what it shows that we have too many Democrats acting like Republicans and adapting their particular form or their particular ideology. Check this out.
In New Hampshire today, Pete Buttigieg said something very strange about Democrats and deficits.
My party's not known for worrying about deficits and the debt too much, but it's time for us to start getting into that business. Because what we've seen in Washington is that the party that talked a lot about the deficit when they were trying to kill off programs, when it came time for this corporate tax cut, turns out they don't care. There is $1 trillion deficit now, and created under a Republican administration. Which means if my party doesn't start getting interested in deficits and debt, nobody will.
In the middle of that, he attributed just the current $1 trillion deficit to the Republicans, but twice he criticized Democrats about the deficit, saying Democrats are, quote, not known for worrying about deficits. And he said, if my party doesn't start getting interested in deficits. Both of those lines are Republican lies. During Pete Buttigieg's entire lifetime, Republicans have increased the deficit and Democrats have worked hard to decrease the deficit and taken grave political risk in doing that. Pete Buttigieg was 11 years old when Bernie Sanders in the House of Representatives and Joe Biden in the United States Senate cast politically brave votes on a deficit reduction bill that no Republicans voted for because it included tax increases as well as spending cuts. And the Democrats lost the House of Representatives because of that vote for the first time in 40 years. The Democrats lost the United States Senate after that vote. Those were tough votes for Democrats. The that they cast out of their sense of responsibility about the deficit. When the Republicans got the White House back under President George W. Bush, the deficit and the debt skyrocketed again because Republicans and their reckless tax cuts. And then when President Obama took office, finally the president was worried about deficits again because the president was a Democrat. And President Obama managed to force a vote in a Congress controlled by Republicans. President Obama managed to force a vote in the Congress to raise taxes, even with the Grim Reaper, Mitch McConnell, in control of the United States Senate, because President Obama was worried about the deficit. 2 current presidential candidates voted for that deficit reduction. Bernie Sanders voted for it. Senator Amy Klobuchar voted for it. And she stands on that debate stage beside Pete Buttigieg, who has never done one thing in his life about the federal budget deficit or the national debt. 3 hours after what you just saw him say, reporters caught up with Pete Buttigieg again, and they asked him about his earlier statements about Democrats and deficits. And this time, surely after some consultation with his rapid response team, he put the Republicans first.
Yeah, so there are 2 things to think about. The first is Republican hypocrisy, because I believe every presidency of my lifetime has been an example of deficits growing under Republican government and shrinking under Democratic government. But the second is that my party's got to get more comfortable talking about this issue.
He couldn't stop at the part he got right, the Republican hypocrisy. He had to go on to criticize his party. Pete Buttigieg literally doesn't know what he's talking about when he talks about Democrats and the deficit, or he's deliberately lying, and I'm sorry, but those are the only choices. As someone who stood on the Senate floor in the middle of the night in 1993 as a Democratic Senate staffer and watched with pride as only Democratic senators cast that brave vote on a deficit reduction bill, which later cost some of them their re-elections, I will always fight the Republican lie about Democrats and deficits. There are plenty of things to criticize Democrats about. This isn't one of them. And every informed Democrat knows that.
Well, folks, it seems like we're still having some sound problems. Let me just tell you that if for some reason we can't get it back, this particular issue will rerun. I promise you that this particular issue will rerun. Let me go ahead and get our program started with Mr. Bill Shire, and then we'll continue thereafter. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies. I'm here with Bill Shireman from, this guy's in like 3 different organizations.
Three hats on today.
I mean, Future 500, Bridge USA, and Earth X. Is that
right.
Earth X? Welcome aboard.
Thank you very
Bill.
much. Thank you very much.
It's great having you.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something, guys. You know, at Politics Done Right, we follow a lot of the tenets of the Bridge Alliance, and that is you don't necessarily have to agree. We have different points of view, and what we do is we talk about them and we hash them out. Today, Bill was at my table.
I was.
And Bill, you have somewhat of a different view. I would tend to call you maybe somebody that thinks we need to make changes on an incremental basis. I am somebody who thinks at this point we need some sort of a revolutionary change, or more so. And you know what? I know that where we're going to land is somewhere in between. First of all, tell me a little bit about what you believe.
Well, what I believe and what I've experienced in life is that we all are connected to each other. We all serve particular roles. We're not all the same.
Right.
We're all different, and our differences make us whole, and they make us much more than we can ever be as individuals. And so I am a bit of a paradox, I guess,
Right.
a multiple paradox.
Right.
I am a Republican. I live in San Francisco. I'm an environmentalist. I've been an active environmentalist for decades now. I run Future 500,
Right.
which is all about bringing people who hate and demonize each other together from
Right.
the corporate and the activist community, and we get them to help save the planet. I am a donor to and a mentor to Bridge USA, which is young students at colleges all over the country who actually want to talk together across the partisan divide, progressives, conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, and the many who are trying to decide. And I also am very active with a colleague, Trammell Crow, in EarthX, which is the world's largest environmental experience, and a place where not only do we have 200,000 people come to learn what they can do about the environment, to Dallas, Texas.
Wow.
A diverse community in the heart of middle America that proves that the environment is not a partisan issue and should not be. Should not be. That's a crime against nature, literally.
Well, against humans as well, you know.
But we also bring leaders together there. You know, Republican senators, Democratic senators, big donors from all sides, investors, environmental leaders, scientists, and so on. And we put them all in a pot together, and they all kind of work together.
And I think that is important. It's the same thing that occurred around our table. I mean, the thing about it is, like, I disagree with you in that I personally believe that, and like I think I explained to you on the table, I think you need to see things through my eyes. I need to see things through your eyes. You need to see things through my eyes. One of the things that I think you came out and I said is and I think David, another person on the table, said we have foundational issues. And I think, if I understand you correct, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you don't necessarily think we have foundational issues that necessarily has to be solved immediately. You are of the belief that we could look at. I think you were maybe wanting to play the whack-a-mole game.
It's no, I don't actually, and I'm glad you asked, because it's different from that. You know, I look at revolution and transformation as two very different processes.
Right.
And you know, I want transformative change.
Okay.
And when I look at nature and when I look at human development, I notice that transformative change happens when you bring complementary opposites together. And we were talking about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Founding Fathers, and various historical events that have led to both positive and negative effects in this country. And I believe that I look at them very seriously with my eyes open to both. I've been a social justice advocate all my life, you know, from being in school and always representing the person out of the loop to to today, having been an advocate for LGBT well before it was popular.
Kosher in the and it's not kosher in the Republican Party yet either.
And a Republican who I think stands for what Lincoln stood for, and much of what Teddy Roosevelt stood for, and Dwight Eisenhower stood for, and Ronald Reagan stood for, which is not where the party is right now, in my view. But there are flaws in our Constitution and in our Bill of Rights that were there, I believe, because we were in battle with folks and we made certain compromises to our ideals. I'm a glass 10% full guy. You know, if a glass is 10% full, I figure, well, that's another 10% to put in my glass, and I'm just going to get it up to the top. So, but the Constitution, I think, is about 70% glass full, 30% glass empty, in the sense that there are racist and sexist and old-fashioned and some dysfunctional elements to it. Those should be corrected. But I think that the idea of revolution, of toppling this because we perceive it to have been a product of wealthy white European men, is extremely short-sighted. And it belies what happens in 9 out of 10 revolutions. That when you have a revolution that destroys the foundation that's there, even though that foundation has flaws, you tend to fall even deeper into the abyss. Sorry.
That's all right.
See what happens.
You see, he got excited and lost the mic.
That's the consequence.
But I tell you, I tell you something. I want to interrupt you here. This is important. Believe it or not, in what you just said, there's much that I agree with, especially when I talk about, I think what happened is we have different definitions of revolution. I like something that you just said there. There are some foundational issues in the Constitution that are darn good. My revolution doesn't do anything against those.
Yes.
Okay?
We hope not.
We hope not.
Sometimes in a revolution, sometimes things happen that we don't intend. In fact,
exactly.
Most of the time.
I guess what I'm saying is, maybe we are using hyperbolic language when we say
Yeah.
When we say revolution, maybe for some people, like Republicans, like my brother here, we want to temper that. But what I'm trying to say here is, if what you are saying is you acknowledge that 30%, and I think I would proffer that 30% is probably what needs change.
Yeah.
If you are willing to change that, I think you would get a buy-in from most of us.
Yeah, I think so. And here's where the problem is. I go in my work, I am always about bringing opposites together, and I see value in both. So I get to experience deep progressive communities and deep conservative communities and libertarian communities and, racially and ethnically and religiously stratified communities of all kinds. What I find is that each one has the answer that the others are looking for, but each one sees the other in its objectionable extreme.
I like that. That is so true. That is so true. And I want to stop you for one specific reason. Here's the deal. I have spoken to people I thought were so radically right-wing and sat down and drank coffee with them and figured out that in reality, they wanted exactly the same thing that I wanted. And not only that, when I expressed the policies I support, decidedly progressive policies, in a manner that enlightened them, in a manner that they saw a benefit for their family, before their ideological tick kicked in, they're with me, and sometimes they are like, I guess I got to rethink that. But you have to first develop that trust. That they think you're not judging them because they come to you with a wall.
Because they're protecting themselves.
Right.
We protect ourselves. And we have two aspects, we have lots of aspects. But in terms of how we engage on differences, we have two aspects. We have the warrior aspect and we have the citizen or peacemaker aspect. The warrior aspect, to go to war, you've got to kill people on the other side, which means, I've heard from soldiers what the experience is, and they have to turn the other side into non-humans. They have to develop a name that's demeaning, and they have to obliterate any thought of humanity in that person in order to kill them and then go on killing more. So, in war, you dehumanize your opponent so that you can kill them without remorse. In political war, we're doing that. The right, often, folks on the right who are of the warrior mentality, they are demonizing the progressives on the left. Not just the warrior left, but the entire left. The entire left, they are evil, they must be vanquished, and we must reign supreme. And on the left, they're doing the same thing with the right. Now, if you're on the right and you're in a convention, as I often am, I'm looking at the warriors and I'm thinking, I'm not as extreme as they are. I know they have a point, but I wouldn't put it that way. But I'm a little quieter than they are because they are sure and they are certain and they are out to kill. And same thing in the progressive community. I like what the warriors are saying. Corporations have too much power and they're polluting, and I really want to change that. On the other hand, they want to tear down capitalism, tear down the corporation, and put government in charge. Not so sure about that. On each side, most people disagree with the warriors, but they still stand behind them in loyalty and unity because they figure they're their warriors. They'll at least push it in that direction. But that's not appropriate. Warriors should not be leading our two political alliances. They should be under civilian control. That's the way we've learned, that our armies work best, is if civilians are in control. The 70% in the middle need to get together, but why don't they?
I don't want you to...
Because they're divided.
Right. And I think they're divided because I think the middle is mythical. And let me explain. I think we may need to change the paradigm. And I think the paradigm change means issue per issue. And let me explain why. I spoke to a red, conservative, religious, Republican, white woman in my community. And I explained to her without naming any kind of things, because my wife has lupus, and I explained the way the medical system works. And then I started to I started to explain what it would be nice if it were like. And when you itemize all the things that I told her, it was equivalent to Medicare for all, as I envision it, as many envision it. That's what it turned out to be. And she loved it. She loved it. And then I felt a bit guilty because living in my conservative community, she probably assumed I was a conservative. So I looked at her and I said, ma'am, I just want to tell you, I'm a Democrat, and not only a Democrat, I'm a left-wing Democrat.
You're a progressive.
And then she looked at me and she turned red-faced. And she looked at me straight in the eye and she says, but you're so nice. And then I looked at her and I said, ma'am, you need to go out with a whole lot of other people because we're all nice. And then I said, well, what it proved is that ideology is preventing us from doing a whole lot of good things.
It's true. It's true. However, there are legitimate differences in the right and left worldview and methods. And I think, that nature, God didn't make a mistake in making roughly half of us, to the left of center and roughly half of us to the right of center. We really do.
But I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you there, Bill. I want to challenge you. I don't think it is left of center and right of center. I think, and I would love for Republicans like you and left-wingers like me to be able to agree on this. It's I think the way we solve the problem, in my humble opinion, is that we look on these items an issue per issue, because there's nothing left or right about a Medicare for all system. There's nothing left or right about a system where a mother who wants to go to work as a professional, or a dad who wants to work as a professional, can't have a policy envisioned that they can afford healthcare so that they can be productive to society.
But let me make a point about that, because the destination can be the same, but the two sides look at different pathways to that destination. And here's the way I look at it. In my experience, I call progressives and the liberal left, I call them the liberators, because they have a basically optimistic view of nature and people. They think people are basically selfless and nature is basically supportive of us. And so when they see that something is wrong or painful or challenging, they decide that that is wrong and that needs to be wiped out. And they feel that if you can wipe out the sources of oppression and limit, that human selflessness and nature's bounty will flow freely. The right has opposite assumptions. They think people are basically selfish and nature is basically a challenge to us. We live in an adverse world where we face risks. And so when they see a problem, they don't say, well, that shouldn't be. They say, that's the way life is. Life is full of impediments, and our job is to figure out how, in the face of those impediments, we can cultivate a society where people act in one another's interests and do for one another and protect one another. I call conservatives the protectors, because that's their modus. And you bring those together, you have a very healthy society. But if you have them separate, you have the left thinking that the only problem is oppression, and that if you just liberate people to do their thing, everything will flow smoothly. And you have the right, and they think that everything is about conflict, and that if we can just defeat the enemy, that everything will be right. We need them both in that. We need liberators to allow us to express ourselves fully. We need protectors to protect what we have. But right now we don't have that.
And what I'm saying,
dysfunctional communities.
What I'm saying is this: my posit here is that thing that you're looking for, that brings the right and the left together, is actually government. But when you and when I say government does that, is because, first of all, you're absolutely right. And Debilyn could tell you about a video that I did for, I don't remember, it was a living room conversation in her body. I said, I need conservatives. And I say all the time, I need conservatives to save me from my super altruistic being. In other words, to tell me, well, remember, everybody isn't going to behave like that. But
Right.
here's the kicker.
Yeah.
And I think that's what government is for. And what I mean by that is this. If we have a functional government, when those policies are created,
Yeah.
those policies were created with the altruism of the left and the pragmatism of the right.
Yes, absolutely.
And that is government.
That's the
but
way
the
it should be.
But the problem is,
Yeah.
what we find is that the right demonize that thing called the government. And if you demonize the government, which is we the people, what happens then is government cannot become the solution, because the one thing we should have in common is government. So I'm looking for conservatives,
Yeah.
Republicans like yourself, to preach government,
Yeah.
but functioning government
Yeah.
of and by the people.
I fully agree with you. And I think, we both stereotype one another. And it's easy to look at the right and say the right hates government, the left hates corporations.
Right.
And you certainly find people on both sides.
I'm a businessman.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or I should
We
say I
all are,
was
one way or
a
another.
businessman.
Yeah.
Till I did
Succeeded,
this.
So it's right. So that's a great thing. But we know that Republicans revere the Constitution,
Yes.
they revere the founding fathers, they revere this system of checks and balances, which is structured for the conservative purpose of assuring that our selfish and combative interests are tamed and directed toward the common good. The right understands the need for that, and so they tend to have a stronger association with those constitutional principles, the basics of government, and they like the institutions that help to keep order, police and soldiers and disciplinary ministers and so on. They see the positives in that. The left tends not to as much, because having an optimistic view, it doesn't think as much about, well, how do we create an institution to correct the problem? So when I look at the left and right, I look to the left to understand the problems.
Right.
And I look to the right to understand the solutions.
No,
just as you said, the left idealizes and the right is pragmatic.
And I am not. And I need to correct that. The old right. Okay. And the reason I say that, right, is remember earlier today when we were discussing on the table, I said, look through my eyes. Okay. When you talk about Republicans believe, they believe in the police and they believe in discipline and so forth.
Yeah.
That is fine for you. To me, when I say they believe in the police, it means I don't stand a chance whether there's a corrupt police or not. That's what I see.
So that's the problem. The left understands that there are abuses of power.
Right.
And they tend to dismiss these sources of discipline, police and soldiers and hardcore ministers.
I don't want to dismiss them. What I want to do is I want the acknowledgement from the right that these institutions, there is social injustice based on issues of race, based on issues of a lot of white people in Appalachia have the same kind of problem as well. So, and I think that is something that isn't acknowledged by the right. And I think a Republican like yourself, being in a space like this, talking to a progressive like myself, should say, you know what? That is a deep enough issue that I need to take back to my side. And I shouldn't say my side. We need to call our side, but take back to the other side and say, we need to do something about that. Because when I talk to you about looking through my eyes, it's not about, I don't want anybody. I mean, I'm like anybody else. And I want to be treated. And everybody else want to be treated as an intellectual being, as a human being, like anybody else.
Right. Well, earlier we were talking about how we view the Constitution, the founding fathers, and through my eyes, I see the positive attributes of that. Through your eyes, you see the criminal attributes of that. And at the table, we're saying, well, which view should you accept? And one person said, well, we should accept the criminal view because that's what we need to work on first.
Right.
And but my thought is, we need to see reality, not choose between perspectives, but choose the finer perspective that happens when you have both of those views.
If we can build, I can accept that.
Yeah.
If the right were to accept that, look.
Yes.
I cannot, the reverence that many Americans have for the founding fathers, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't have reverence for somebody who once considered me 3/5 of a person, even though it was a
But
compromise.
those are not the same thing.
No.
Those are not the same thing. I abhor
Right.
that aspect of the Constitution.
I know you do.
And I put myself in the place of the people who battled over that and
Right.
were forced to compromise. And I'm
Yes.
sure they felt terrible about it, probably on both sides. And I wish it wasn't there. But that is such a beacon of wrongness
Right.
in this document
Right.
of righteousness that it calls our attention to it and forces us eventually to the table to resolve it.
That's because it's human.
Yes.
It's
so
human.
Here's what I would say. We both need to see through the eyes of the other and then respect what we see. Once we respect what we see, then the opportunities to work together are the same. If
Well,
the
that's why you're
left-
here.
If the left, so let's start with the rights. If the right can see that there are glaring flaws
Right.
in their beautiful Constitution,
Right.
and that there are people that have been harmed historically
Right.
by the consequences of those flaws. If they can recognize that
Right.
and respect that, and the left can look at it through their eyes and say, that is a magnificent document that has its roots in Eastern thought, in Western thought, in Southern thought, in Northern thought. I mean, the ideas in that
Right.
Constitution were not
All over,
new
yeah.
to these
Right, right.
rich white men.
Right.
They borrowed them from
A lot of places.
every civilization that came before them, and you can trace specific
Right.
ideas to everywhere in the world. It was a composite of virtuous ideas.
Bill, stop. You're telling me that, okay? You need to tell others that.
Like who?
The people on the right.
That was what I was telling the people on the left.
I know, but
people on the right
No.
are more aware of that.
No, what I'm saying, no, they're
Yeah.
not. You are not a typical Republican
Well, no, I'm not.
at all. Okay, and they don't understand that you just mentioned something about the Constitution that very few people will acknowledge, and that it came whenever Republicans in
Okay,
general
yeah.
talk about the Constitution, they talk about Western democracy.
Yeah.
Not saying, well, we borrowed a whole lot of things from a lot of different places to
Yeah.
make this preeminent document.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
I think it's important.
You're right,
And that
you're right,
you
you're absolutely right.
acknowledge that. Other Republicans, if they can acknowledge that as well, it also gives, it also forces them to accept the humanity of that many more people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, completely agree. Could not agree with you more. And you're right that there's not nearly enough acknowledgement on the right of the distant origins, the ancient origins of the
Exactly.
ideas that are in the Constitution. You look back over history, you find those similar battles
Right.
fought over and over again for thousands of years.
Right.
And, my sense of history as an American is about 200, 300 years. That's my sense of history.
Right, right.
I just came back from Mongolia, where their sense of history is like
Thousands.
10,000
Yeah,
years.
imagine that, yeah.
They're living in ways that their predecessors lived 2,000, 3,000 years ago
Right.
in many respects, and they have a sense of continuity and purpose and wholeness that gives them a certain confidence and fulfillment in life,
Right.
even though they don't have our wealth. And meanwhile, we're chasing around wealth.
no,
'cause
but
we don't-
it's
we're not
amazing
sure what
because
we're here for.
I'm glad you said that. Over here we've determined that wealth is capital, and what's amazing is wealth is not capital. Wealth is happiness. Wealth is loving what you do. Wealth is so much more. I give up a lot of wealth to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, here's the funny thing about it. I think if we taught that, we'd be a lot further. Now, I want to change subject. I'm going to do sort of a 180 here.
Yeah, okay.
Because I want to talk a little bit about capitalism.
Okay.
Because you love, you made it seem like leftists are pretty much against capitalism.
No, but I said that's the stereotype.
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is, no, I wanted to give you kudos.
Yeah. Okay.
I am against capitalism as it's practiced in the United I truly believe
With that
in
little line at the end, as it's practiced.
Right.
So it's capitalism as it's practiced.
Well, the reason why is that people have different definitions of capitalism.
Yeah, that's for
I
sure.
like free enterprise. I like that if Bill wants to go out there and do something, Bill can go out there and do something, profit from it and whatever. But after he's taken a certain amount of profit out of society, it really isn't his. I know he thinks he worked. I know Bill thinks he worked for it all, but society is comprised of a whole lot of people that absent them, Bill couldn't be Bill.
Yeah. Well, I think definitions are a huge problem.
Yes,
Of course,
it is.
We need definitions in order to agree on terms, but we basically are using terms that have very different meanings
Yes.
to different people.
Yes.
And then we ascribe so much importance to them that we get
After-
angry at each other. Like,
exactly,
how
right.
can you be against
Right,
children? Well,
right.
I'm not against flowers. It's different from that. When I look at capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
and it's probably a term that we maybe need to graduate from, I don't know, like socialism too, but when I look at capitalism, I look at free enterprise.
That's what I
capitalism,
believe in.
Capitalism to me is the self-discipline and art of saving
Mm-hmm.
as you go and building up surplus so that you can be free to do the big things that you
Right.
want to do and not just survive day to day. That's what capitalism is.
And-
Capitalism, if you save, you can invest, you can do magnificent things, you can create magnificent enterprises and serve people with them. And when I think of ideal capitalism, I think of small, locally based capitalism.
Right.
When I look at monopoly capitalism or oligopoly capitalism and really industrial capitalism,
Right.
I don't really consider that to be anything close to what capitalism
And let me stop you
is.
there, because ironically, that is what I call capitalism, the breaking up of companies into stocks and bonds that people make hundreds of billions of dollars on trading stocks and bonds,
Yeah.
that stocks and bonds to corporations that are where the people don't make anything. That's what I call capitalism.
See, and that's-
Capital. And
Well, I'm opposed to that.
and you know what is so funny about that?
Right.
So you are not very far removed from where I am. And the reason I brought this subject in is
Yeah.
after speaking to you, I had a feeling that that is what you would say. So I hope folks realize that,
Yeah.
no, we're all believing in free enterprise. And this stuff about what people are calling socialism is,
But there are really important
Let me hear it.
distinctions to make. So, for example, you mentioned Medicare for all.
yes.
I support medical care for all.
Okay.
I don't support Medicare for all.
What is Medicare for all to you?
Medicare for all is a particular approach that aims to provide medical care for all, but which in practice will not.
Okay.
And the reason it won't is because we are envisioning a system that is controlled by the federal government with 20 layers between where decisions are made and where they're deployed, and with an array of vested interest groups in the middle that screw the system so badly that by the time the service gets to the people, there's very little left for them. It's all scraped off in the middle. Vested interests have this Congress by the throat. And if we make the mistake of establishing Medicare for all, listen, we can do it. Here's how you do it. You do it the way Obamacare happened. You do it the way Medicare D under George Bush happened. You go to the Congress, you say, we've got a great plan for Medicare for all. And here it is. It's like the Singapore plan. Singapore has a great system, by the way, as do many of the, white European, lily white countries, of Northern Europe. There are good systems all over the world, but they never have 200 million or 300 million people in them.
All right.
They are smaller than that. So if we make the mistake of Medicare for all in this political environment, every interest group in Washington, D.C. will get its piece of the pie, and they will lock in their business model into that piece. And the dollars will be spent, and the dollars will be extracted from us, either in the form of taxes or deficit spending, which puts us in debt to China, basically, and makes us slaves in the future. And we'll end up with a system that is good for 2 years, probably really good for 2 years, and then just sits there unchanging the way government programs do for the next 20 or 30 years, and gradually service gets worse and worse. And if you want evidence, go into any, DMV office almost in the country. There's a few good ones.
All right.
And that's the kind of service you'll get. Democrats and progressives tend not to think long-term, systemically, about what happens to these institutions. They think if you establish Medicare for all, that means you're giving medical care for all.
Okay.
Republicans are more like, well, we want medical care for all. We want it to be easily accessible to anyone who needs it and affordable no matter what catastrophe you may face. And not all conservatives agree
Right.
with that, but I do, and I think countries like Singapore do that. But they do it with a decentralized system where decisions are made at the local level, where people are empowered instead of dependent. And that's what I want. And that is critical to achieving the progressive goal, which is medical care for all, but not the progressive method of Medicare for all.
All right, let me give you the caveat now, okay? It is an absolute certainty that if you have a single-payer system, in other words, one entity, whether it be the government or some nonprofit paying a bill, it is much less expensive than having 100 private insurance companies paying a bill. Insurance companies paying a bill depend on several things. One, they have to have advertising for themselves. They have to pay expensive executives. They have to pay. They have to do all of this. And not only that, they bastardize the people so that they'll have a competitive advantage.
I remember when I first, and I hear what you're saying.
Let me finish. I gave you the entire 5 minutes to talk.
Please finish. Yes,
okay,
go for it.
So it and what I'd like you to listen and not jump to conclusions.
Yeah.
So what we have then is we have all these costs within the healthcare, within the insurance. I'm not yet talking about the healthcare, about providing healthcare. I'm talking about paying for healthcare.
Yeah.
Now, every doctor's office, they have to negotiate with several insurance companies, which means they themselves have to hire staff to go through and negotiate payments with 100 insurance companies that they have to deal with. These inefficiencies within the I'm only talking payment system are huge. 20 to 30%. Don't believe the Obamacare forcing it down to 18%, because there are ways that these companies capture more money, and they capture more money in having things like when you go for care, this one is out of network, and so they don't pay. So there's a lot of ways they get around it. Not only that, but they're in the service denial business. In other words,
absolutely.
That's
what they can deny is another.
That's what private insurance companies do. So I'm saying, first crack, if you have one payer, here's what we lose. We lose the entire infrastructure of all those people that are there to deny service. We lose the entire infrastructure of all those high-paid executives. We use the entire infrastructure of those doctors' offices who have to have different these employees. So I mean, the savings are huge. The most conservative report done by the Koch brothers came out straight up and said it'll cost, I don't remember how many $1 billion less over 10 years to do this. But not only that, it'll cost several $10 billion less than it costs right now to leave 30 million people uncovered. And with Medicare for All under that scenario, it's 100% of the people covered. So that is just paying the bill. But there are other inefficiencies within our system. Drug companies, we develop most of the drugs at universities and these other places, and we do not start to capitalize, and notice I use the word capital from capitalism, capitalize on these drugs until it's ready for market or close to ready for market.
And then it goes to a company,
and then they inflate the prices. And again, that is part of the cost of our healthcare. Same thing go with a whole lot of things. So when you talk about all the people that are getting their piece of the pie, I'm saying right now we have there's a partnership for the Partnership for America's Healthcare right now is working on narratives to get people scared that Medicare for All is the big bad thing. I need to convince people like you, because I think as a conservative who wants to conserve and wants to pay the least they want to pay for these services, I need to convince you that Medicare for All, at least the payment portion initially, is actually the conservative view.
I understand what you're saying. I hear a lot, progressives or Democrats come and they say, well, this idea is really a Republican idea, and we're
No, I don't want to call it.
No. I accept that, but I completely agree with you with what's wrong with the current system. I am no advocate of the current system. In fact, I agree with you that if we shifted to a single payer system, then for 2 years, the quality and service would be far better and the cost would be far less.
So I want to stop you there.
For 5 years,
I got to stop
it would continue to be less,
stop you there.
but not as much. For 10 years,
No, I want to stop you there. And let me tell you why I want to stop you. You're an activist. You are Future 500, Bridge USA, and Earth X.
I'm more like a social entrepreneur.
You're a social entrepreneur.
Starting these little things.
So, well, you better, after this show, you better become a subscriber to Politics Done Right then.
I'm going to.
Now, here's the deal.
Yeah.
And this is important. If you say the first 2 years are going to be good, it is incumbent upon you to make sure government works.
Why
So,
me?
no.
You?
No. When I say you, I mean, you mean us.
Yeah.
Oh, and you're correct. Let's say that.
Yeah.
It's incumbent on us to make sure that continues. If we go to sleep, we get what we deserve. So what I need is for you not to look past the 2 years. We need you to look at the 2 years and say, oh, this would be good. Republicans, let's jump on board and let's make sure those crazy left-wingers, after we get this thing working right, don't do that.
And a lot of folks say that, but it took the Democrats to get it through, and it's going to take the Republicans to fix it.
No.
And I understand.
You're
that.
more important than
I
you.
hear what you're saying.
Sir, Bill, I want to stop you again.
Okay.
I don't find many Republicans like you.
Well, we would if we actually talked to each other.
Exactly.
Just we're not talking to each other.
And what
There
I'm
used to be
saying,
lots of Republicans
what
like
I'm saying,
Yeah.
you have some attributes that can work in this game. And when I say game, I'm not saying it as a game. I'm saying you're a white baby boomer Republican man.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's almost an accusation these
No,
days.
it's not an accusation. It's actually
Most of the time it is now.
This is not an accusation.
Yeah,
And don't. I am straight up the way I talk.
Yeah.
And let me tell you what I mean by this.
Yeah.
Peer pressure is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And I have spoken to many white Republican men before that are in total agreement with me in the things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if they see me in a public space with their friends, I can see the fear over their eyes that says,
they know you, and they.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
The fear over the eyes that please don't come and talk about what we spoke about. And I know not to do that.
Oh my God! Yes. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is there's peer pressure there, but guys like you can solve that problem. But first, because I mean, like I said, I sat at the table with you, and I could read you, and there are a lot of Republicans here that you came and you did this. A lot of Republicans in here won't do this.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, I think there's people on all sides. At a bridge conference, you probably have more people who are willing to talk.
Yes.
But man, people are scared. And basically, 70% of the people, as I find, are basically like you and me. We're able to talk about this and work it out, but we're a little afraid to because of our friends and what they will think. And 30% are the friends that are imposing the peer pressure. Like you cannot talk to somebody across that aisle. That person is evil. And if they said anything that sounded good, you got to look behind it and find the evil motive.
And that's the thing. You see, the thing about it is I speak to everybody. And judging from you came out and you had a conversation and you're doing it on air. So, I mean, I think that is solid. And I think this is the kind of move that we need to make to move forward.
Yeah, well, I agree. And I think it is helpful if we really trust that God or nature created us all for a purpose.
Yes.
That we all serve a function. Whether you believe, in a higher intelligence, a higher force, or simply in the, random wheels of evolution. And I'm more in the former category, but I understand the latter category too.
Yes.
That we all serve a purpose.
Right.
We all are the product of millions of years of evolution.
Yes.
And we have specialties.
Yes.
And those specialties work together because we live in communities and we are more whole when we're together. We need to be aware of some of our faults. I have lots of faults. I've learned about them over time. And it used to be that I more thought everybody else should be more like me. And now I think, thank God they're not. I mean, what a messy world it would be. The left needs the right because the left goes around with, often kind of rainbow-colored glasses and doesn't understand that intention doesn't necessarily lead to reality. That we face barriers along the way, and the declaring that this and that is a right doesn't mean it will just flow. The right understands that. They understand how to make human rights happen, make education, for all happen, make healthcare for all happen, but they're in denial that there's a problem. So the left is in denial about the solutions, but they know the problems. The right is in denial about the problems, but they know the solutions. We only work if we get together.
All right. I want to close, but before I close, I just want to make a little adjustment. The right and the left can work towards a solution. I don't think that the right particularly knows all the solution, nor the left. And the reason I say that, I think that's an important statement I think that's an important statement to make, because again, Medicare for all, we're not going to finish that talk now, but I think it is something that we need to explore not only from a mathematical standpoint, but from a responsibility standpoint. In other words, from a standpoint that says, look, if we get something that works, it's not something that's going to work for 10, in your case you said 2 years. If it works for 2 years, we have to ensure that it works for 20 years.
And I would say that rather than eternal vigilance on everything, we do fall asleep after a couple of years.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yeah.
And that's why these institutions have been crafted. And let's look at systems like Singapore's. Look at a book by Dr. Sean Flynn. He's just written a book. It's a great book about.
Send me an email about that.
Systems.
I would like to see what his objections would be.
Yeah, if we establish systems on the Singapore model or some of these other models, Singapore costs 75% less than our system, and the service is higher, and the people are paid just as well. But the doctors get to do doctoring, and the nurses get to nurse. They don't have to fill out all these damn forms.
What
right?
about
it's the same thing.
Insurance companies?
And there are no insurance companies. The government. There are no insurance companies. It's a system. It's like the system you want, but it actually works. And it works because it's established with a smaller population, with fewer interest groups able to screw around.
I am going to investigate the Singapore model, but it sounds to me like you're still saying that it's one payer, right?
It's essentially one payer, but everybody pays a tiny part of it. So rather than having free service, you pay $1 you pay 10 cents for your prescription.
I think those are technicalities that can be resolved.
It wipes out a lot of the waste and
there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's going to be called Medicare for All. How it's implemented, I think, is where when you get on board, you can say, but we need to put these conditions on.
Well, but be careful of labels. I've written laws in California.
Yeah, I know.
And if you adopt the name that, if I say capitalism for all, the left is not going to go around, even if my capitalism is their, local free enterprise.
Right.
So,
actually, you're right about
it. Bill, just has to be medical
Bill,
care.
You're right about that. So, I mean, unfortunately, we're going to have to do something. But look,
hey.
Bill Shireman,
yes,
it's my pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for being here at Bridge Alliance and speaking to us at Politics Done Right.
Happy to do it.
And we need to have more Republicans like you do. And like I said, you have a lot of work to do.
And we need more Democrats that'll step across the line and talk to the evil empire.
You're not evil.
We're
You're not evil. Thank you.
The system is kind of evil, but
thank you, brother.
The people are not.
You're a good man. All right, man. Take care.
All right, folks, that was Bill Shireman. That was the beginning of a conversation. That conversation will continue. Please, folks, do remember that this is a show that needs your support. So please remember to go to politicsdoneright.com, politicsdoneright.com. Show your support. I have some links inside of the thing under. If you go to the Facebook page, politicsdoneright.com with Egberto Willies, you'll actually see the areas that you can provide support for the show. We do need your support. I also have the links in there that you can have different methods of supporting our program. I want to make sure and let you know all the way how that we have some issues to discuss. And here we go. I want to play for you the thank you that we give to all our customers coming through. And here we go. Patrons and prospective patrons, thank you for your support of independent media. Why is it crucial? We are not dependent on the whims of those who advertise on the platforms we use to bring you news, truths, opinions, and empowerment. We ensure that all of those who must have a voice, whose voices have been silenced or ignored or heard, those who have messages and narratives to better us all, have a place and an outlet to do so. With all the misinformation out there,
Our platforms give you power. You are integrated into a network where no one has a monopoly of ideas. Remember, Politics Done Right is yours, and you can be a part on the scene or behind the scenes. Thank you for supporting Politics Done Right and our corresponding websites, newsletters, and outlets. Thank you. Folks, thank you Whoa, we have one little thing there to remind you of. Anyway, folks, thank you so kindly for being a part of Politics Done Right. I hope you enjoyed that interview. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how we end this baby. I am what? Out!
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.